Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
A stealthy cyber group known as Salt Typhoon quietly infiltrated Army National Guard networks, exploiting vulnerabilities and evading detection for months. The group's living off the land tactics allowed them to blend in with legitimate activity, raising alarms about the resilience of U.S. military and civilian infrastructure. Experts warn that this breach marks a dangerous escalation in cyber espionage, and it's a wake-up call for national defense. Here to break down this threat is Chief Product Officer at Phosphorus Cybersecurity, Sonu Shankar. Mr. Shankar, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Terry. Happy to be here.
People who follow cyber will know about Salt Typhoon, but just to get everybody on the same basic level of understanding, could you tell us who or what they are and why they're in the news?
Sure, absolutely. So Salt Typhoon is a code name given by the industry to a Chinese state-sponsored threat actor. So this group is believed to be operating under the guidance of China's MSS, or their Ministry of State Security. That is China's Foreign Intelligence Service and their secret police. From the scope of their campaigns, this group specifically focuses on broader strategic goals and accomplishing those broad strategic goals for China. And they specialize in stealthy, long-term espionage operations against the United States.
And what makes them so hard to detect?
So there is this concept called living off the land. And the idea with living off the land is when you're looking for long-term persistence, which means you want as a threat actor to be embedded in your target's environment and strategically look for data, look for intelligence information that might, again, accelerate the accomplishment of your goals. One of the, I would say, prerequisites for that type of a campaign is defense evasion, which means you do not want the defenders in your target environment to have the ability to trivially detect your presence. So Salt Typhoon, they use this living off the land approach. They are masters of that approach. They have the ability to specifically target entities, assets within a target's environment that are more likely to be unmanaged or unmonitored, which means there aren't specific logs that might be indicative of their presence going to a security operations center and being analyzed at scale, which also means they are going after assets that are less likely to be patched or maintained from a firmware or software standpoint, which means these are assets that are more likely to be running old software or old firmware and are therefore more likely to be vulnerable to trivial vulnerabilities. So they're not necessarily using O days or 0 days. They are using vulnerabilities that have existed in the wild for a long time. And they use advanced techniques such as getting in, deleting logs. So if there were to be a forensics investigation in the future, and even if you could not detect their presence when they got in, they make it really hard for future investigators to come in and see that they were even there. So that is what makes them different, and that is what makes them incredibly advanced and sophisticated in their ability to evade existing defenses.
That's really helpful. I'm speaking with Sonu Shankar. He's the Chief Product Officer at Phosphorus Cybersecurity. The cyber world's been watching them for a long time, and they made the news a while back for getting inside telecommunication systems. But just recently, we learned that they had embedded themselves, I guess, in a state's Army National Guard network. And people are talking about that as a serious escalation of their approach and their attack. Can you walk us through what happened there and why it is so significant?
Absolutely. So recently there was a DHS memo that articulates at a high level what happened at one state's Army National Guard network. And what is known is that Salt Typhoon came in, they maintained persistent access for close to 9 months. So I believe it was between March and December 2024. and they were able to compromise the guard's network. They exfiltrated administrator credentials. They grabbed very detailed network diagrams. So this is essentially a map of the network. What are the assets that form the network environment at that state's network? Even geographic mapping of some installations and personal data on service members. It is something we've got to take incredibly seriously because this is indicative of their ability to get deep into understanding the network posture and the layout, if you will, of one of the target environments. And more importantly, this also includes information around how that one state might be collaborating with other states. And so from an impact standpoint, the administrator credentials, it allows them to do things like create new credentials that will in the future be treated as a fully trusted user. So this goes back to their high-level approach of living off the land and prioritizing defense evasion techniques. So when they create a fully trusted user, any security analyst or security operations center analyst that might be reviewing events is going to assume that is a trusted user and not necessarily go deeper into investigating that event. The network diagrams, I think from an impact standpoint, that might shorten recon activities in the future from weeks to potentially minutes, because now the adversary, they have the ability to specifically look for choke points, if you will, within the network to understand what device is communicating with what other device, what role that device plays, what might be the assets that they need to target if they were looking to accomplish max impact, max outage. So if they wanted to bring down that environment, if you will, they may specifically go after a subset of the entire set of assets, right? So that information is incredibly useful for future campaigns. And I also think the personal information is an interesting one because I think there is an opportunity for adversaries to really transcend that cyber-physical domain where they can start using information about service members to potentially couple the traditional cyber attacks with more advanced AI deepfake type attacks where they might socially engineer a specific individual or team to, in the moment of crisis, to impact how they might mobilize, right? So delay mobilization or blind command and control. So that personal information piece is outside of how we tend to treat personal information theft and loss. I think today with what is possible with AI deepfake attacks, I think that's incredibly serious.
Given how this organization remains undetectable, are there things that organizations can realistically do now to protect themselves and their organizations?
Yeah, great question, Terry. And again, going back to the way Salt Typhoon operates, they specifically look for ways to evade defenses. And so there's a large footprint of assets in virtually every, and this is commercial and government environments that are known to be unmanaged and unmonitored. So what I mean by that is the user workstations typically run what we call an endpoint security agent. So this is security software running on that asset that monitors that specific endpoint asset and sends information to a security operations center when it detects anomalies or events that might be interesting to an analyst to further investigate. The other way to detect threats usually is monitoring network traffic, and that is traffic going in and out of an environment. And finally, you've got logs. So logs from cloud applications, from assets on premises, and these logs, again, go to a security operations center for analysis. Unfortunately, there are a lot of devices in every environment, such as everything from HVAC controllers, door controllers, cameras, printers, the list goes on. These are IP-connected, network-connected embedded devices that you can't run agents on, that are not sending logs up to a security operations center, and for the most part are trusted from a network traffic standpoint, which make them incredibly attractive targets for an actor such as Salt Typhoon. And so the advice I would have is One, beyond the standard, you've got to be on top of your patching. So you've got to be aware of how far behind you are in terms of patching some of your gear. And in the telecom attack you mentioned, I believe they were about 6 or 7 years behind patching. And so beyond that, I would highly recommend your listeners to start paying attention to that wide footprint of devices that have essentially been ignored from a security standpoint.
That's great counsel. I've been speaking with Sanu Shankar. He's the Chief Product Officer at Phosphorus Cybersecurity. Thank you so much for clearly explaining this really important development in cybersecurity space. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.